today we're going to end with a really, really fun person. And she's played in the Olympics twice, okay? She won the silver medal in 2012. She won the bronze medal last year. And in 2014, the U.S. team won the gold in the World Championships. Guys, this is Christa Dietzen. Let's welcome her today. So Christa, you have a perspective that basically none of us have, and that is the perspective on being on the other side of the Olympics. We watch it on TV. What are the Olympics really like, and what are some of the things that that we might not know about what the Olympics are like?
Sure. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is, all the famous athletes that we see on TV, the DeAndre Jordan, the Serena Williams, the Ricky Fowlers, they are just as excited to get pictures with everybody else. And I remember walking through the village before opening ceremonies, and this is kind of half embarrassing, but anyways, I'm walking through the village, and Serena Williams, who it didn't dawn on me at the time that that's who it was like, hey, is that Ricky Fowler? And I was like, yeah, and walked right past her, not even thinking. I'm like, well, there was Serena Williams. So they're just as excited to be a part of the event, and it's the only that I'm aware of, the only athletic event where nobody goes in with any type of already accolade at the Olympics. Everybody's starts on the first level, and you're all trying to you're all vying for gold. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, Christa, tell us your story real quick. How did you become a Christian, and then how did that affect your volleyball career?
Well, growing up, I grew up in a Presbyterian church, but God to me was church on Sundays and saying and doing the right things. I didn't understand what a relationship with God was like until actually moving out here in 2009 to join. I got invited to join and train with the U.S. team. And this question kept popping up at a couple FCA events that I got connected to, and it's like this relationship with God, giving your life to Christ. And I was like, I don't think I have that. And in fact, for a long time, I thought that volleyball and God were separate, and that God really wasn't a part of sports in a way, or didn't really care about sports. And then as we get into my story a little bit more, now I can't imagine volleyball without God.
Okay. Well, what's the hardest part for you then about being a Christian in a highly competitive environment?
Sure. So, every day we're competing. So there's 25 girls on the national team, and there's only 12 spots in the Olympic Games. So I think, you're constantly competing every day against these girls, and you're judged on your performance every day, just how you guys are going to be judged on your finals here next week. And I think, just constantly having maybe that pressure of trying to live up to your own expectations, or maybe those expectations that, that people have from you, from your hometown. I think your identity can really get, wrapped up in in what people view you as. And I think that's the toughest, is just continuing to remind yourself that, that God is above all of that, and that He cares more about you and who you are as a person versus what you do and how you perform.
Yeah. Was there a place in your story where you said, wow, that lesson really sunk in a little bit more? That idea where, the performance, I'm not judged by that, but I'm really judged by how much God loves me and finding my identity there. Was there an example of that in your story?
I think, as I continued, I struggled with performance anxiety. So basically, when I came out to the national team, I graduated from Penn State, and you're usually the girls that are the top players on their collegiate teams. Well, then you join the national team. It's like, okay, now I'm starting, you're back at square one, and you're challenged again, and your weaknesses are exposed because you're competing at the highest level. And all of you, I'm sure, even if you don't know the ins and outs of volleyball, all know the skill of serving. And serving is the only skill in the game where it's just what you do isn't directly affected by anyone else. It's just you and the ball back there on the line, and you're serving. And that was my weakest skill. I didn't know how weak it was until I got to the national team.
Yeah.
And I was forced to serve. And God's, finding my relationship with God was actually through that performance anxiety, because I needed God. I needed to lean on Him to help me work through, that performance anxiety, that anxiety that I had, that, I was so afraid that this weakness was going to prevent me from fulfilling my dreams and reaching my goals. And, ultimately God was more than that. And that it was so important to remember that, number one, He cares about all the different things that we do in our life and that we're a part of. And, He used volleyball to teach me about how strong His love is, and that He will continue to be with me. And I struggled with, performance anxiety all the way up until my very last, match at this past Olympic Games, some form of it. But what I had to learn was to trust that God was going to meet me in my weakness, and that He was going to give me the tools and equip me to deal with those anxieties and those fears of failure, and of not reaching the expectations that I had for myself or that others had for me.
I like the way you put that. God gave you the tools to meet you in that time, instead of feeling like a place where I think sometimes as Christians we hit a place of anxiety and we say, oh, God loves me anyway, and we stop trying. What was that about God's love that pushed you to keep trying and developing the skill of serving, or developing a strength in the performance anxiety?
Sure. So, I think so often we want a quick fix, right? It's like, God, come on, just take this away.
That's right.
And, I think He uses, some of those trying times, those challenging times to grow our character, or do something, work something out in us, so we have this foundation that, when we receive that promotion or that breakthrough or whatever that looks like, then we're equipped to deal with the challenge, that other challenges might come. Sometimes when you have a breakthrough, then I've found that the enemy tries and, comes right in and tries to kind of mess up that breakthrough, or question, well, is God still going to be there, or is God, going to continue to be there? And, I remember, and this was definitely a process where I had to learn, okay, after having this breakthrough, or I had, a great match, for example, serving, and, okay, is God going to be there again? And I just had to trust that this wasn't going to be a quick fix. This was how I was playing volleyball. I had to continually rely on God for the strength that He was going to give me the tools to deal with those anxieties. Because I think, the same road you take doesn't work every single time, but you have to trust that God's going to give you, other windows and doors to kind of to work through, to go through, in dealing with those different attacks of lies and fear and, all the fun things fun things to the enemy that he likes to do.
No, I love that. It's not that God is a method, it's that God is a relationship, and as you learn to trust Him, you figure it out with Him. I love that. So then, what are some of the practices then did you habituate in your life so that you can continually root yourself in a relationship with God?
Yeah, I think prayer before the matches, and also finding cues. In the sports world, I think, but you can find this in any realm. Where can I be reminded? Where can I have those physical cues that that God is with me? And for me, it was stepping off the court and kind of, okay, I'm leaving the screw ups, whatever, to God, and I'm stepping back on the court with Him. And so I think for me that was something that I had to, that was like a practice, that was a cue for me. Obviously the volleyball net, there's crosses all over the volleyball net. There's a ton of cues that you can kind of use to remind you of God. Good. And then also journaling was huge for me. Kind of debriefing after the match and kind of leaving that, because I would kind of spin in some of the challenging times, or the failures, and I had to write those down and kind of leave those go because otherwise I'd carry them into the next match.
Yeah, really good practical things. Thank you. So let's talk about the Olympics last year. You guys were the favorites to win. You guys lose in the semifinals. How do you get your team back up to bounce back in that last game to win the bronze? Like, how do you get your team when, again, you guys are the favorites, you expect to get the gold and you guys just don't get there? You know you're not going to get the goal, but how do you bounce back?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I had a newfound respect for a bronze medal match. I'd never, that I remember, competed in a bronze medal match up to that point. And it is tough because, you get your hearts broken, you didn't get what you want the day before, and then you got to turn around and compete, for this bronze medal. And, for sure it was, crushing to our whole team, but, at the end of the day, it was an opportunity for us to I think true character is shown in those matches. We had a great example for us. For those of you that are familiar with the volleyball world, Carrie Walsh and April Ross, they had the same thing happen to them 24 hours earlier, and they came back strong. And Carrie says that it's one of if not her favorite medal that she had earned, just because it was it was a grind. It took a lot of heart to go back and compete in that match. So again, we had a great example, and then I think. We had a culture shift on our team in 2013, so after the 2012 Olympics. And, I felt that we really developed a really strong culture of vulnerability and just some trust and strength that maybe wasn't present in the years in the quadrennials past. So we wanted the gold so bad to almost prove and justify our work. Yeah. And I remember, that day after we lost, kind of having a team meeting, and hey, our identity is not in these medals. Our identity will never define this team. We're so much more, and the relationships mean so much more than medals.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to pause here. We'll call timeout, and we're going to ask you guys to text in questions, reflect, and give us some things that we can talk about on the second part of this chapel. So we'll ask our worship team to guide us in a reflection. Well, we are going to answer some questions from our live student audience. All right, so here is our first question, Christa. And the question is, what's the biggest way you see God through sports?
That's a good question. I think, God. I think with athletes and athletes that have a relationship with God, He gives us a platform to share His love, to share His goodness, and whether that's publicly, whether that's through leadership in huddles and helping those. Now being retired, being connected to girls that are now going through the same thing that I'm going through. And I think, just helping the future generations and to see that God does care about sports and being with us through those challenges.
Yeah, great, thank you. Here's another question. How have your surrounding teammates responded to your faith?
Yeah, so, my teammates, they know where I stand. Yeah. But, I think it's very important, as a Christian athlete to meet your teammates. I've been in, I guess, non-Christian environments, or on non-Christian teams I went to Penn State University, which is a public university, so I've been in those environments my entire life. And I think it's so important to not isolate yourself as a Christian, but to meet others where you're at. You don't have to do and participate what maybe non-believers are participating in, but it's important to remember that you sin too as a Christian, and right. It's very important, I think, to meet others where they're at, and to really get to know them as a person, and love them through that.
Yeah, great. Here's another question for us. Were there many other Christians on the USA team, and if so, how did this community of believers help each other and you in their and your walk with Christ?
Yes, so the Christian community on the U.S. team, both the men and women's indoor team, is growing, actually, which is really exciting. And there were probably a handful of believers, and it was really awesome at the Olympic Village. They have faith centers, and it was really powerful. There was 3 of us that went and ran into a chaplain that I met back in 2012. And at this recent Olympics, we were just able to go and get prayed for and pray for each other. And it was just really powerful to connect on that level at the biggest stages of sports. So it's just, it was really special. One of my favorite moments from the Olympics, for sure.
Great. What's your relationship like with some of your teammates from this past Olympics, or just even on the U.S. team? Is it like pretty close still? Do you guys still hang out?
Yes, very close. I think when you go through, I'm sure some of your roommates from college, or anything that you become involved in, and you go through life stages with these people, and nobody else really can relate on the same level that we can, just because of what we went through together, and
right.
And so those bonds are forever, for sure. So definitely still keep in touch with them.
Absolutely, great. All right, here is a really, really long question, okay? As an athlete, playing for the glory of God is my priority. Doing physical activities as my worship is refreshing. What do you do when you realize that the natural instinct of competition is bring self-glorification, and how do you refocus on God while keeping a high level of play?
Great question. I think remembering that God was the one that blessed you with these physical gifts in the first place, and and it's still something that I'm working through. The idea of working hard, and growing up, and I was praised for outworking other people, but that was my own, that was that hard work and that praise. Then I would chase that, and I think that's what ultimately led to some of my performance anxiety, because I thought I had to figure it out myself or just work harder. And I think it was so important that God gives us these gifts, and God gives us grace to to work hard, but who are you working hard, and why are you working hard? Who are you working hard for, and why are you working hard? And I think it's just important to remember that, that ultimately you are using the gifts that God blessed you with, and to just continue to remind yourself when you do get some of that self-gratification or praise from other people, that sure, accept it. And I'm not saying just run into humility, almost being over humble, but and just being able to claim, God gave me these gifts to do what I do.
Great. So can I ask you something? Off of that, it's like you've built your career and built your life off of playing volleyball and playing at this high level. What does it look like for you now as a retired athlete, and how do you see yourself living for the glory of God now?
Sure. So funny you say that, because in my women's study, my women's Bible study yesterday, I during prayer time and just some of the things that we were talking about, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think I mentioned before that God gave me this, blessed me with His platform, and that I need to open my mouth, which means that participate in things like this. And honestly, public speaking scares the heck out of me. But I don't know, because my default is always people pleasing and what other people think, and I know that's always been a pitfall of mine. So it's challenging, which is exciting. And again, I don't know if God will lead me to that, but I continue to, when I'm prayed over and multiple times, that's kind of, been a hint in a potential direction. So I'm not sure, but just continue to use the platform, whether that's public speaking or, being connected and helping, some of the younger USA girls.
No, that's great. I think a lot of us in this room aren't sure what our future lies ahead, and so we're trying to figure that out too. So thanks for saying that. Here's another question for you. What was your most awkward moment with the team?
Most awkward moment with the team. I'm not sure that I have one, actually. I don't think I...
You guys are that comfortable, huh? Just you guys... The culture of vulnerability that you said was trying to...
for sure. Most awkward moment. I mean, for sure I served a ball under the net at some point during my career, but I can't recall one. I'm sure there were moments, but nothing's coming to me at the moment.
All right, if you think of it in the middle of another question, you need to tell us.
Sure.
Okay? All right. Here's another question. Have you ever been injured in your career? If so, how did it affect you? How was God present in that?
Yes. In fact, this last Olympic cycle, there was a moment where I wasn't sure. I had 3 knee surgeries on my right knee throughout my career, 1 in college and then 2 with the national team. In the last surgery, I have very little cartilage left in my knee, and so there was some bone on bone. And it was, some pretty gnarly pain that I had to work through, and just some challenges with swelling and whatnot. So I came to the point where I'm like, okay, God, is it time to be done? And this is 2014, actually. And about, 3 or 4 weeks later, my knee finally started responding well, and then I was able to play in the World Championships, and we were able to come home with a gold medal. So I was really thankful that I was able to be a part of that team. But it was difficult for sure. And I think through injuries, I look back on them now, and as difficult as they were, I tore my ACL in college, had shoulder surgery, actually quite a few, shoulder surgery after the 2012 Olympics, and then 2 more knee surgeries. And I look back on them as, okay, yes, those were challenges, and they weren't very fun, but I think, I was always stronger as a result. I think character-wise, drew closer to God, and then it allowed me to, when I had my shoulder surgery, it was like, okay, here's a great opportunity to get my legs strong. And then when I had knee problems, it was like, here's a great opportunity. So there was always something that I learned more about my body and how to strengthen myself.
Yeah.
So I look back on those as, again, they were challenges, but opportunities, to grow in those areas.
Absolutely. Like treating your body well and understanding how your body reacts, that's actually a very important part of being a Christian too. Right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The whole self, for sure.
All right. Absolutely. Great. Here's another question. What are some practical advice you have for handling anxiety? Again, we're in the midst of finals,
sure.
And there's a lot of anxiety, and we got to perform on these tests.
Yeah.
How do you help us?
Sure. I think, I had heard this yesterday in the women's study that I'm a part of through my church, and I believe it's in. Forgive me, I don't have my notes on me, but I believe it's in Luke, and celebrating that. That God has already overcome our challenges. God is already meeting us at the end of finals, and to celebrate and to walk in that confidence. And I wish I had heard that when I was still competing, because so often the anxiety, and I believe even the worship leader just mentioned it during worship. It was anxiety comes from us not believing that God is bigger than our problems, and or that He's not going to be there. And I think walking in and knowing that He's going to be there, at the end of our finals, and He's going to be with us throughout that. So I think anytime, everybody has their own ways of connecting with God, and maybe it's when you have those anxious thoughts, maybe it's stopping and praying. For me, it was turning on worship music. Maybe it's going for a bike ride, or going to something that kind of stops that path of the downward spiral.
Yes, good.
And I think you just finding those tools, that God gives us, and just trusting that, that He's already, He already has that and made that victorious.
Great, thank you. All right. How about this question? What would you say to your collegiate self looking back?
That's a good question. I think one of my, I guess, maybe not, I don't know if I'd call it a regret, but I wish I was, I understood what a relationship with God was in college, and being able to connect to the groups on campus like Athletes in Action and FCA, because I realized how much of an impact they had on my life now. And I remember a teammate of mine at Penn State that was involved, and I would have just loved to have, had the courage or understood that relationship with God back then as well.
Yeah. Can I ask you another question off of that? So what's it like as a student athlete, and you're overwhelmed in school, and what's it like to put yourself into a career after that? And what are some advice that you might have for our students as they look to the career life?
Sure. Well, I'm starting to figure out what I want to do now, but I think, I think since I retired, since I'm kind of going through the transition that y'all are going through, and or that you will be after these finals, I think that there might be some, it might be very clear, like your path,
yeah.
And to not be afraid to kind of to dabble into something and realize that it's not for you, and you don't need to beat yourself up. Like, I don't know, for a second I thought sports broadcasting was something that I wanted to do, and it was fun, but that wasn't my calling. And I tried a couple other things and realized that wasn't what God had for me. And maybe it's rest, and maybe it's, I don't know, and that's okay. And I think you have this degree, and you spent X amount of years doing this, and but it's okay to not know right away. And I think just that trust that God will open the necessary doors for you and lead you in the right direction.
Great, thank you. All right. Here's another question. Are there ever days when you either don't enjoy volleyball or feel apathetic toward it? If so, how do you push through it?
Sure, absolutely. There was days where, honestly, it was hard to walk through the gym doors because of the performance anxiety I was dealing with, and then there was times where I went through like a burnout period, kind of after some of my injuries, and just sort of ready to be done. And then I realized that and sometimes it can get mundane and feel like the same thing every day. And I think what helped me is someone said to me, okay, every moment and every day is a new day. And I know that's like, so, well, yeah, of course. But truly, like, you look for the new ways that you can learn, look for the new ways that you can connect with girls on your team, because you never know what that could, being present in that, you never know what that could lead to down the road. So yeah, that was like refreshing. Oh, it is new, even though I'm still practicing from this time to this time and doing whatever. So I think the same thing every day. So I think it's important to remember, even though you're doing maybe this feels like the same thing, there are new experiences in that.
Great. So Christa, we close with a final question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, what are some of the biblical principles that you thought through as you were preparing for this chapel, and how has that been put into this conversation?
Sure. So I think, when I was thinking through that, when you asked me that question via email, I thought about a couple verses that I just kind of clung to when when I was dealing with some of my anxiety and performance anxiety. So the first one is 2 Corinthians 12, 9, and it's my grace. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And I think when we are weak and we are dealing with anxiety, or we have something that, we're not great at, I think it's so easy to want to hide it. So, and that's, I don't know, I think that's what the enemy wants us to do. He doesn't want us to voice it, to share it, to approach it, head on. And I think that, God's power is made perfect in that weakness. And to admit, like, I'm nervous, or I'm anxious about my finals, or, you have something that you're not great at, you don't need to hide it. You'll be amazed at how many other people have the same anxieties and the same struggles and deal with the same weaknesses that you do. And I think that's the biggest gift that you can give someone, is by being vulnerable and sharing, because you'll be amazed, and then you don't feel alone, and they don't feel alone in the process. So
great. Thank you, Christa. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Let's thank Christa for being here today.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.